Hello, and welcome back to the Cracking FAANG YouTube channel. A user in our Discord community asked me something along the lines of, how difficult is the day-to-day at FAANG? I know the performance expectations are high, but is this manageable? So with that, the topic of today's ramble will be whether or not it's actually difficult working at a FAANG company. I can't speak for every single FAANG company out there, but I have extensive multi-year experience at Meta, so I'll base my views around my experience there. Though a lot of the ideas will apply across the industries, so don't think that this is a Meta exclusive video. The backdrop for today's video is Hampstead Heath Park in North London. As I live in West London, I don't often get to come here, but when I do, I'm reminded of the absolute beauty and peaceful vibe of the place. Truly one of the best parks in London. Before we get started, I just wanted to shout out our 3 channel members, Third Impact, Girish Dior, and the OG legend who's been here since the beginning, Nikolai. Thanks for your support, and I appreciate it greatly. If you're watching and want to become a channel member, click the join button. You can unlock special perks like members-only content, a private Q&A group, resume reviews, and monthly mock interviews. Okay, without further ado, let's get into it. To answer the question that my viewers sent in, I'm going to have to do the thing that every wise senior software engineer should do and tell you that, like with all things software engineering, the answer is unexciting. It depends. Cool, yeah, so that's been today's ramble video on the topic of whether it's been hard to work in FAANG. Thanks for watching, like, comment, subscribe, and all of that. Unfortunately, I can't just leave it there, can I? The answer is, of course, complex, and it really does depend on a large number of factors. There's really no one definitive answer to the question at hand. What I can say for certain is that the difficulty of working in FAANG is entirely in your hands to some extent. You can make the experience as difficult or as easy as you want. Let's dive into this deeper. How can we make things hard? What do I mean by this? That you can make your experience as hard as you want it to be? Well, it really begins with the team that you decide to join. At Meta we have, or maybe I should say we had, the ability to choose our own team. I'm not quite sure what the current situation is with bootcamp team selection these days, but for the purpose of this ramble, let's just assume that you can pick your own team. When it comes to choosing your team, how difficult the job is really depends on your choice. There's a big difference between joining a team which maintains an internal tool or service and maybe you have 100 users at the company versus joining a team which works in ads ranking for Instagram. Obviously, joining the ads team is going to be astronomically more stressful and involved than a simple internal tool where if you ship a bug, no one really cares. Ship a bug in ads and it could cost the company hundreds of $millions when you're operating at this scale. So here's where we see our first line of separation between hard and easy at FAANG, team choice. In general, the larger the scale of the system you're working on, the more critical it is to the business, and the larger pool of people, both internal and external, that depend on your service, the more stressed you will be. And this goes for both product and infra. The more visible and used your product or service is, the more pressure and stress will be on your every move. The expectations are much higher and the consequences more dire if you screw up. Now, of course, there's a flip side to this equation which tempts people to join these high visibility, high impact teams. In exchange for working with basically a sword dangling over your head, any wins you can achieve are massively multiplied by the scale and importance of the team's work. Even delivering a 1% improvement to something like ads can net the company billions, and thus in turn, you'll put yourself in position to be promoted faster, receive higher performance ratings, and receive extra equity grants for your work. Of course, to the flip side of that, there's the constant high stress, tight deadlines, immense pressure, 3 a.m. on-call firefighting, and burnout. So, returning to my original argument, it's a trade-off. The next topic is a bit of a follow-up to the previous one, and it's centered around the complexity of the product or the service that you decide to join. Let's say you go down the infra track and decide to join a team which owns a service. The overall complexity of this will also play a huge factor in whether your life is a breeze or a pain in the ass. Even if your team is not necessarily mission critical like an ads team, the complexity of the codebase and problem being solved is something to keep in mind. Some products are relatively well defined and mature, and there really isn't that much that needs to be done. Integrate with some new partner teams, work to improve the performance and reliability of the surface, and so on. Of course, these sorts of roles aren't the ones that are going to be landing you huge company-wide impact and netting you a big bonus, but if you want to kick back and relax, then you can always find a team like this. When it comes to technical difficulty and the complexity of the code you have to write, it again really depends. Are you working in a brand new space without well-defined best practices and have to bootstrap from the ground up? Or are you maintaining something that doesn't really change much half over half? Is your code base up to date with the latest best practices and libraries, or is it a house of cards spaghetti code base which no one wants to touch? I guess these points are always on both ends of the spectrum, and returning to the original focus, which is for the average engineer on the average team, the answer is that the technical portion really isn't that complicated. A lot of the hard problems have already been solved. There's a tool or framework internally which probably does a ton of the heavy lifting for you. IDEs have been integrated with generative AI, and they basically just generate code for you. Not always the right code, I might add. So don't worry, the robots aren't going to be taking over just yet. You don't really have to worry about storing and retrieving data. Tooling sort of just handles that for you. CodeGen works miracles when you write code and need to update artifacts. CI pipelines will just run automatically when you submit code. They select the relevant tests to run. FAANG companies have invested so much money and effort into developer productivity that it's just a pleasant experience, and everything working perfectly lets you just code without any issues. So at this point you might be wondering, what the hell do these lazy bastards do all day? Surely it's not all just rest and invest. And of course not. No, there's still a ton of work to be done, and here's where probably the hardest part about working at FAANG comes in. Delivering projects and initiatives across such a large corporation. The reality of FAANG these days is that companies have ballooned to quite a large size, and with that comes all of the perks and pains of that change. As the number of teams and employees grows, so does the difficulty of delivering projects. I think to best illustrate this, let's examine the scope of some of the levels for software engineers to illustrate this point. In the beginning, you're an E3. You're basically in constant need of babysitting from your tech lead and senior team members. You don't really have much context, and you're not that familiar with the code base of even your own team. You largely operate on a task basis. Someone gives you work to do as part of a bigger picture, and you don't really see what goes on behind the curtain. You just know you need to change that button from green to blue and add a logger call to some call site. You're a code monkey. Monkey given task, monkey do task, monkey get new task. When you get to E4, you start to have more involvement in a particular part of the system. You still largely are being guided by a tech lead or senior engineer, but you have a bit more freedom to, 1, determine things that need to get done, and 2, interact directly with partner teams to work with them. You'll generally have a bit more independence, but you really aren't taking ownership of much more than a small piece of a greater project. Once you make it to E5, you're now a fully fledged senior engineer, and you'll be expected to operate independently. You'll still work closely with your tech lead to align on the broader direction of the team, but at this point, you're expected to be able to manage a project from end to end on your own, scope out the problem space, clarify the ambiguous parts, unblock yourself when you're stuck, and deliver the result you agreed on with your partners. At E6+, this gets cranked up even more, as now you not only need to align the broader direction of your team with that of the higher level organizational goals, but you also need to play a role in influencing the direction and roadmap of the future for the team and the org as a whole. You'll need to be in the loop with many different teams, understanding their work streams, aligning them with yours, creating roadmaps, taking shared goals, getting people together to agree on a way forward. Of course, there's so much more to this, but I think we have enough to go forward. As you can see, the more and more senior you become, the majority of your time actually starts skewing away from writing code and shipping things. You still do that, of course, but everything is predicated on first working across teams, products, organizations to define the way forward. To me, this is the hardest part about working in FAANG. Once you pass the IC4 stage, or E4, the days are gone when you just get a problem and can immediately start coding a solution without much forethought. As you progress to the more senior levels, this really becomes impossible. What you quickly realize is that the scope and scale of problems you'll start to solve as a senior engineer are no longer bounded by just your team's scope. There's no way around it. You're going to need to take a step back and become a bit of a Google Docs engineer. Instead of coding right away, you need to do your due diligence, meet with your partner teams, understand their work streams, understand the problems present, what the gaps are in the current system, what the goals are of the collaboration, and of course, it doesn't just stop there. You need to investigate. Do we have the data for what we want to build? Are there blockers present? Are there any parallel work streams? Do we have a dependency on another team? Yes, okay, well, let's get them looped into the discussion. And again, it just doesn't stop there. Once you've scoped out the project at a basic level, typically you'll need to throw everything into a document and start getting your partners to review the proposed solutions, adding information, clarifying details as you work collaboratively to align on an agreed path forward and a time frame that works for 2, 3, or even more teams. And this is just for an E5 when you're scoping out a project. Take it up a notch for E6 Plus, where you really just have to play 4D chess, aligning workstream objectives across your broader org as a whole, connecting teammates to the relevant partners, defining work streams, setting shared goals, tracking metrics, reporting OKRs to leadership. And all of this happens before you even write a single line of code. So my point here is that working in FAANG is hard, but not for the same reasons why working at a startup might be hard. There, everything is on fire all the time, you have to play many roles, infra is either non-existent or always breaking, and you're just trying to survive, sprinting towards the next goalpost before the runway clock runs out. At FAANG, the companies have grown to such a size that this really isn't a problem anymore, but with size and scale comes complexity. Executing requires so much more forethought and planning, and this becomes painfully clear the higher up the ladder you climb. You're essentially a glorified puppet master, juggling 5 balls in the air at the same time, keeping a pulse on many parties, each with their own goals, agendas, and roadmaps. It's this ability to figure all of this out, make sense of the ambiguous, understand a problem space well, plan, and work across functions which truly makes FAANG's job difficult. The code itself is never really all that complicated. Outside of some niche teams that really specialize in hardcore things, you really don't need to be that technically talented to perform as a software engineer. You, as the average listener, you're never going to need one of those crazy graph algorithms Google, for some reason, likes to fuck with you and ask on their on-sites. You don't need dynamic programming. You don't need Morris trees. You don't need quick select. None of this LeetCode bullshit. Me personally, I really can't recall a time where I had to implement something and I just could not for the life of me figure it out. Every problem I've ever encountered, I've been able to solve using Stack Overflow, looking at other people's implementations, asking my tech lead for advice, or God forbid I ever have to do this, read the official documentation. For me, the biggest challenges have never been technical. Creating APIs, writing React code, implementing GraphQL endpoints, it's all pretty basic once you've done it a few times. It's really the same old, same old. The challenges have always been learning how to operate at a higher level, how to approach projects like a more senior engineer, how to drive a project across the organization, involving potentially multiple teams, getting everyone on board on the same goal, and ultimately delivering. And that's the beauty of being a software engineer. You can't really teach this in a course, you can't read about it in a book, and you can't practice it on LeetCode. You need to be in the trenches, doing. Now, some might say, well, I don't want to deal with this shit. I'd rather just write code somewhere and not have to be a part-time program manager, a part-time Google Docs engineer, part-time software engineer. And fair enough, it's not for everyone. Hell, not even all senior engineers at FAANG are like this. There are archetypes where all you do is code, and you damn sure better believe these code monsters are cranking out diffs like there's no tomorrow. But likely that isn't you, and probably won't be you. Again, this video is aimed at the experience of the average engineer at FAANG, not the rock stars who blow your mind with their achievements. Well, I think this video has certainly lived up to the status of a ramble video because we've gone from discussing how FAANG can be hard to what engineers are responsible for and back again. I suppose this is a good time to stop and perhaps pick things up in another video. If you made it this far to the end, why not drop a comment down below with your thoughts on the matter? Leave a like and a subscription to show me you liked the video, and also why not join our Discord community? Link is in the description below. We'd love to have you join us. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great rest of your day. I'll catch you in the next one.